What's going on, fellas? So this is a 96 Honda Civic Coupe D16Y8 manual transmission car. And it used to look a lot nicer. Photo here. And I figured I'd use this opportunity to talk about parting out cars and how to make money parting out cars. So, starting out, you kind of want to pick a certain car that you know has a strong community around it. This thing, I haven't actually made a whole lot of money off of, as this one being a 96, and these ran until, I think, 01. This body style of Civic, I believe it's the EK chassis. I could be wrong. Since these are still kind of on the road, it's going to be a little bit difficult to sell unless it's, say, something like a old Chevy square body. I know those are hot. Not square body, I'm sorry, the OBS. Or like a 22B body, I don't know the actual name, like Subaru, Impreza and stuff. So let me show you, this car ain't bad to part out. And I'll get to the tidbits and everything on it. Let me show you a car that is going to be bad to part out. So this here is my 90 Cressida. I got this thing for $1,000. It runs, but not well. I'm actually looking to get rid of this one, but I just have an excess of Cressida stuff because I've got that one over there, and I've just been a Cressida guy for a long time. These cars are a real pain to part out, and I'm going to tell you why. So, with something like a Toyota Cressida, there is not a big enough market of people that are gonna want these cars, and also because the parts are so scarce, you usually got to ship them. People in California are gonna want them. You know what I mean? Stuff's gonna sit for a while because there's only about 70 or 80,000 of this chassis, MX-83, that being, that were ever made. And you also got to factor, we're talking 30 years later, so there's even less of them on the road. This is a factory 1991 Toyota Cressida motor, and I scored this thing with the automatic A340E 4-speed transmission for $500, although it has 60-something thousand miles on it. And you might be wondering why. Well, I come back to, these aren't really worth anything. Nobody's really wanting these. They're not hot. People are not chomping at the bit to build 7Ms like they are 2Js and 1Js even. People will let them go for cheap, which is awesome if you're like a guy like me where you want to build one. But let's say you get a Cressida, it's a little beat up, and you get it for $600 with a blown head gasket. Even if you refresh that motor, do gaskets and all the fancy bits, you're looking at maybe $800, and then you got to wait on the seller. I have a couple more over here. These are factory 7M GTE Toyota Mark III Supra motors. These are a little bit more desirable, but I come back to nobody's building these engines, so they're hard to sell. I actually bought this whole lot of these for $400 with a set of CP Racing pistons and a whole bunch of other goodies. I've got spare parts for days. I've had the gauge clusters up on Facebook for the better part of 2 years now for, I think, $85 a pop, and I've barely had any bites. These I haven't bothered to sell. Unfortunately, I've looked at them. The cranks are pretty rough. They need a good service. They need rebuilt / taken to a machine shop, and I just don't think it's worth it to do it right now. Now, you want to talk about an engine that is hot and something that will sell for really cheap if you can find a good one. This is kind of a better example here, we have a 2AZ FE Toyota motor. These are pretty good to sell, especially if you can get one that hasn't been run with 020. Let's say the car's been hypothetically rear-ended or something. You could probably pull this motor, ECU, harness, and auto trans, or even manual trans if you're lucky, and sell it for probably $1,000 to $1,400 depending on the condition, just because those cars are still on the road. I'm going to step out here real quick and show you. This is my daily driver, my 2009 Toyota Matrix, and the engine for these, I was actually looking for one, and that motor in there is actually what's going to be going in this guy. These engines are really desirable because they burn oil. They have a factory flaw, and you know that's something to keep in mind when you're flipping cars. If you can get one, you know, hey, it's in good shape and it doesn't have XYZ issue yet. Subaru head gasket people, you know what's up. This one burns oil. I've done everything on it but the engine. I'm pretty much I haven't even bothered really doing anything but minor gaskets and very, very basic maintenance on this thing that's related to the motor, because I'm going to build a new one and I don't want to mess with putting money in an engine that's junk. I'm almost positive the bores are like Coke bottle shaped and they're no good. Now, that's not a big deal. You can always bore it out, but I'd rather just start fresh. So another good do of flipping these kind of cars like the Civic here is, if you know your area and you know your market right now, the JDMs, they're hot, and you can sell these pretty quick. I have sold a good bit of the interior on this thing. Door cards, ABC pillar trim, gauge pod. I sold the manual trans pedals out of it, the front HVAC controls, the glove box, stuff like that, and I usually can sell them in bulk. This thing is on its last steps right now. I'm being parted out before I scrap the shell. I had a guy come who was interested. He hit me up and he's like, hey, I'll take the whole shell off your hands for like $100. And that's because these cars rot, especially here in the Midwest, and this one's in really good shape. Maybe if you got like a coupe shell and you're like, you know, I got rear-ended, you could transfer all your stuff to this, but it needs a lot of swapping over and whatnot. This one also happened to have a clean title. The whole reason this car was, you know, taken off the road is this is our Y8 here. It sent a rod out the side, and so the glass is already cracked, so I just had to have my fun and just toss the motor through the front glass. So that's how that ended up like that. But I got the taillights sold off this thing really quick. Front clip, AC system, stuff like that, you know, and you can sell stuff like this real quick. Another really good example of something that I would love to part out if this car wasn't so nice. This thing could make me a fortune. Just looking at the interior here, like my shift knob. But this thing has a brand new soft top on it. I know these are worth a good bit. I know the hard tops alone go for as much as probably what this thing's worth. Another thing with these like rare cars, you're gonna have a hard time selling these interior bits, at least fast, if you want a quick ROI. You know, it's not really worth hoarding up all these parts for obscure cars like this. You know, a lot of people think, oh, I'll buy a rare car and I'll jack the part price way up and then I'll make a huge amount of money. No, that's not really how it works. Like, a lot of people are still going to want to pay what they want to pay, and you know, you just get stuck with stuff. That's not what I was doing in this case. This was for an interior swap that I did on that white car. Also got this for the Miata, which I'll touch on later, but really cool find that came with it. Another thing that's pretty cool to part out, especially right now, I'm personally not into them, but the OBS Fords and OBS Chevys, these things are always going to have a market because everybody in the States needs a truck to haul stuff, whether it be a race car or just getting you to school. These are great. You know, those aren't going to part out quite like the Civic will, because the Civic's like kind of Japanese car. It's a little weird, especially in my area. I live in, you know, rural Midwest, and You know, these cars are going to part out quick because the people that are looking for parts, or the people that are still keeping these on the road, to be honest with you, are looking for parts. You know, they have a big rust area. Guy, I'm actually getting ready to sell poly motor mounts and tranny mounts too. He is looking for these strut tower, you know, area type deal. That's another big factor. If you're going to part a car out, definitely try to get one that's the least rusty. You know, and if you're buying these cars, you definitely want to buy them for like under $1,000. Something you're going to have a low sunk cost and a high return. Like this car, I know for a fact has, just because like kids drive them and they end up busting, you know, them up and stuff, the airbag module, but I don't really care to pull it out too much right now, just because this car has already made me my money, and I have a very low sunk amount of money into it. It was complete at one point. I feel really bad parting it out, but you know, since I'm cutting this strut tower out for this guy, you know, there's a lot of good parts that you wouldn't even really think of for certain cars that can, you know, bring a good chunk of change. That being one of the things. I didn't really know that these late 90s Hondas rusted super bad. Like, I knew they got the bacon on the quarter, but, you know, entire strut mounts rotting out, you know, that's, I don't know, that's just unheard of. Now, if we're talking like 70s Yodas, 80s Yodas, you know, that's a different story, but I was really surprised by that. And if you have like a cool, weird option car too, you can probably sell weird shit like the sunroof for a good chunk of change on eBay. You know, there's always something, but I would recommend not parting out project cars. You want to get something stock, something that's really not been touched. Just because, you know, for example, let's go over to my Matrix here. Something that's been hopped up just a little bit, nothing crazy. If you were to get a car like this to part out, this is like a soccer mom car, realistically. So I paid $400 for these wheels. They've got newer-ish tires on them. You could probably yank these wheels off. You might get $400 or $500. You know, you're up $100. Nothing crazy, but you know, you want to definitely look over a car too when you're going to sell it, like or going to buy it. I'm sorry. On this car, the immediate standout, if somebody were to buy this thing for a part out, it's been in a rear end collision. You can tell because one, the bumper mounts don't hold up quite right. If you look over here, we got a little bit of panel gap there and a lot more over here. And you can also just jump under it and take a look, but I'm not going to do that for this. I'm just kind of proving a point. You know, and you're talking about parting out, cracked taillight, you know, you can get those for so cheap on Rock Auto, it ain't even worth messing with. Unlike something like the Miata or the Cressida, where you can really only get part out replacements and you can't go anywhere because they're glass. But with these newer cars, they're plastic, who cares? Same with, you know, you might buy it thinking, whoa, I could sell the coilovers for big money. That's probably not going to happen. Even if they are like BC Racing coilovers, if you get some kind of oddball car like this and you try to go to part it out, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna have a really hard time selling these weird aftermarket parts, because not only is it, again, soccer mom car, it's just, who's modifying these, you know what I mean? Nobody's out here modifying second-gen Toyota Matrix and stuff. And this actually had me fooled when I bought this car. This is actually a like 95 Corolla DX headlight. So, you know, when I go to sell this thing, I'm not looking to get a lot. It's got a welded diff and it's automatic. I think I'm just going to give it to some takeover kid for like $1,000 and just wipe my hands clean. I wouldn't even be surprised if it's got some head gasket trouble. And something that a lot of people really think is, oh, I need to part out. You know, I need to get a sports car to part out. You really want to start with something a lot more civilian. This is a 7.5 rear end out of a Ford Mustang V6, like a New Edge. My buddy was parting the car out and getting rid of it, and I can imagine, you know, you could get some shit off of it, But with with a lot of these sports cars, like the Mustangs and stuff, there's such a large aftermarket for a lot of those cars that there's really no need to part them out. If you can sell a set of factory fenders for 40 bucks and I can buy them new for 50 on Rock Auto, there's no point making the drive out, because by the time we factor in gas and shipping, I mean, it's going to cost me about the same anyway. Same with like old classic mini trucks. This is a D21 hard body front grille. I'm not going to say those aren't profitable. If you can find like an old Japanese mini truck for cheap and it's like rust free, there's definitely money in those. But my buddy has done all the old Nissan trucks, the 720s, the D21s, even late Pathfinders, and he's just had no real luck with them. Old mini trucks ain't a bad way to go. You just kind of got to know what you're getting into. I know a big profitable one is like rust-free old Toyota trucks. You definitely want to be on the lookout for them. You can definitely make your money back just selling the bed if you can get it for under $1,000. Something that would be a really good cheap part out. I'll give you an example. You can get them for pretty cheap, and you know they're still on the road, so you could always sell things like the spare tire, the rear hatch, the tail lights if they're good, body panels, real easy stuff to take off, or something with a less reliable motor, but might have a good one. Something like a mid to late thousands General Motors economy car. You know, your Pontiac Grand Prix, stuff like that. You know, those will probably go quick just because people are trying to keep them on the road. Something like a 12 RAV4, maybe like a 2010 or so Subaru Forester, any Honda Accord really. People are always not even modifying them, just keeping them on the road. You know, hey, I need a coil pack, you know, or something like that, because the new OEM replacements from a company like Aisin or Denso or I think it's Nissan that Honda has can cost a couple $100 a pop. And when I was doing the RAV4 video way back when, I actually had a bunch of spare ignition coils for that car, and I actually looked online and it was going to cost about $400 to do all 4 OEM ones. And I just had, you know, a junk pile laying around of them. And that's something, you know, you could always think of when you're going to part the car out. Get every little computer, every little module. Those are usually always worth, you know, a good chunk of change. It's not even just the body on these part out vehicles. You know, there's all kinds of stuff you might not consider. You know, with these cars even, I was looking online. I never would have thought that these like foot plaques were worth anything, or hell, even the door cards for a Mazda Miata. You know, this HVAC controller bezel thing, you know, those are worth a good bit, you know. So my advice would be to buy low and sell somewhere in between, because you're not going to make huge money starting out with a $300 and $400 car. But when you get like let's say like a Ford Fusion, maybe like a 2011 or so, and you know, you start parting out airbag modules and things like that, that's really where the money's at. But you're talking big investment, maybe upwards of $2,500 to $3,000, and you got to hope you're going to make your money out. You definitely got to research the market on stuff like that before you go to buy. Just because if you're spending $3,000 and you're not putting it back on the road for any reason, you know, you're out $3,000. So you got to hope, you know, a local mechanic shop needs, you know, a fender, a hood, a headlight, all that stuff, maybe a front core support, subframe. You know, something like a Fusion would be a safe call, because those are like, that's like every teenage girl's first car. Or something like a Chevy Cruze, you know, that's when you start kind of making it and parting it out. I know that's kind of funny, but you know, I stick with the cheap low-end shit boxes because they're easy to take apart than something newer that's got, you know, Torx bits and stuff. You can rip the whole front clip off of something like this with a 10 millimeter, a 12 millimeter, and a 14 millimeter. And that's something you definitely got to consider when parting out something newer even. You know, it doesn't matter the maker model, particularly GM though. They use a lot of Torx bits and inverted Torx bits, and same with your Audis, BMWs, Mercedes. I stay away from the European stuff unless, you know, something really good comes across, but that typically doesn't happen because, you know, those are the high dollar cars. And I could imagine parting those out could be kind of risky. We don't have a bunch of people rolling around in Mercedes, BMW, you know what I mean. High-end luxury European cars. But stuff like this is where you can really make your money. That $500 Japanese or domestic economy car, you know, these are still on the road and they're a little beat up, and maybe somebody, you know, my buddy bumped the fucking curb and now he's got a black unpainted fender on his red coupe. Oh, you got one for sale, and you slap it on and there you go, you know. And, you know, you can definitely claw your way back out of the hole real quick if you know what you're doing. I know for a while my buddy was really big in the Toyota truck game. You know, beds, motors, transmissions, you know, that stuff. And especially if it's a car you've taken apart before and you know the market. Let's say you're like a Civic enthusiast. That's great, because then taking it apart can be a much quicker process and listing photos for sale. That's another thing I would highly recommend. If you're parting something out, join, you know, whatever car it is, Facebook group to list a lot more of that stuff. You'd be really surprised what you can find. I did it with a Scion XB release series, and people were like, can I get the badge? Can I get the seats? You know, things like that. But yeah, I think I'm gonna cap this off here. I hope you guys enjoyed a little ramble. I'm just kind of bullshitting, and I thought this would be like a fun video to make.